Chad Daybell, let me ask you, did the grave digger dig his own grave? We're going to talk about that. We're also going to give you an update on the jury finding in the Kim Potter trial. That and a whole lot more on today's episode of what some people have termed the fastest minutes in podcasting. Well, hello and welcome to today's podcast. Well, we've just finished, as you know, several high-profile trials. And we're going to highlight today a very high-profile trial coming up this next year. It has to do with Lori Daybell and her new husband, author, gravedigger, what I call a wolf in sheep's clothing, Chad Daybell. Before that, though, let me take a moment to thank you so much for being a part of the podcast today. I want you to know that we do appreciate each and every one of you that are listening. And if you've not yet subscribed to the podcast, how about taking a moment to do so? We'd love to have you as a regular listener. Also, please, if you can, like us on Facebook and all the social media platforms we're on. You can just Google us, Charlie Crimebuster, and you're going to find us pretty easily there. Now, let me just mention that last week on our podcast, Kim Potter, the young lady police officer who accidentally shot a man who was fleeing with her weapon instead of her taser. I did predict that the jury would say that she would be indicted, but I predicted that she would be indicted only on second-degree manslaughter and not first-degree manslaughter. Well, the jury, they did complete their duty, and as I predicted, they did convict her. But not only did they convict her of second-degree manslaughter, they also predicted her of first-degree manslaughter. That was when she shot the fleeing young man, Dante Wright, with her weapon when she thought she was using her taser. Now, fortunately, this type of mistake has only happened around 9 times in the many years that tasers have been issued to police officers. And yet, let me remind you, my friend, that 230,000 people die annually at the mistakes of medical personnel. Yet, very few, if any of those, are criminally charged for their mistakes. You see, I happen to believe that the brave men and women of law enforcement, well, I believe they deserve the same consideration. But yet, we do find that those in law enforcement, they are held to a higher standard. And we must respect the jury. For this is our standard of justice in this country. And while it may not altogether be a perfect justice standard, and maybe I disagree and you disagree with some of the results of the jury, I can guarantee you this, that our justice system, though it may not be perfect, it is the very best in the world. So today, our thoughts and prayers are first of all for Dante's family. No one should lose a young son and family member in such a way. And we do also have thoughts and prayers for Kim Potter, a 26-year police veteran, and her family as they face life with their loved one in prison. Now, coming this next new year, we're going to be introducing to you a new project, a Charlie Crimebuster project. It's called the Peacemaker Network. And that's a place where you and I will have the opportunity to not only voice our support of heroes of today, that is our cops, our first responders, and military, but we're also going to have an opportunity to show our support by being a part of this new Peacemaker Network. We're excited about that, and we're weeks away from our launch. But our focus today involves what has become the most hated woman of America. Yes, there's a new contender taking Casey Anthony's spot. Remember, she was the one that lied about her daughter who was missing. Well, this lady's name is Lori Vallow, and she married Chad Daybell. And lying in the wake of their evil journey? Well, it's just not one body, but now there are 6 dead people that can be associated with them. including 2 precious children. It is, my friend, a story with more twists and turns than a Disney roller coaster. And today we're going to focus on the new husband of Lori Vallow, Chad Daybell. Chad Daybell was born in 1968. He was raised in a home that was religious. They were involved with the Church of the Latter-day Saints, known to many as the LDS Church. However, his own beliefs, well, they actually wandered into a new territory with special visions that he shared with other people. Now, Chad Daybell, he went to Brigham Young University, and there he met Tammy, who was to become Tammy Daybell. They married soon thereafter. In the early years, Chad worked as a sexton at a graveyard. Literally, he was a grave digger. Thus, the title for this podcast, The Gravedigger Digs His Own Grave. Now later, Chad Daybell becomes a self-published author. He wrote more than 24 books about near-death and doomsday events. But now we find our gravedigger author, well, he was arrested. First, he was arrested on suspicion of concealing and destroying evidence. That was after investigators found human remains at his Idaho home. He was booked into jail in the summer of 2020. Now, I must point out that this is the second time that Daybell's property in the town of Salem had been combed through by cops. Cops all say that the search was linked to the disappearance of Joshua J.J. Vallow and Tylee Ryan. Now, you might want to know how this man, who had a loving family with children and was respected in LDS circles, how he later became indicted for murder. Well, I would remind you that we do have several podcasts covering this case. Hey, you might want to revisit those, or maybe review them and getting ready for this coming high-profile trial the next year. We do have on our podcast schedule, we have Lori Vallow, the Doomsday Mom. Lori Vallow, Where Are Her Children? Lori Vallow's Spiritual Hitman. And hey, just a hint here, the spiritual hitman, it was not Chad Daybell that was her hitman. And we have another podcast there about her and Chad. Now, you can find all of those on your podcast platform. And we're going to give you a link in our show notes where you can go to all of our podcasts. And you're going to find a summary in this podcast of how we got to this coming trial. We're going to give you that summary in just a moment. But now, it is time for our courageous Citizen of the Week. Our courageous Citizen of the Week is Cecilia Morales. She was a recent hire at Newark Liberty International Airport. She had 10 years of emergency medical technical training under her belt. And we're going to find that our citizen acted quickly. She was a TSA worker there at the airport. She heard people screaming for help in the line there at the airport security. That's what the news release tells us. You see, a mother had tried to pick up her 2-month-old son from his car seat carrier when the mom realized that he wasn't breathing. Morales, who had begun shouting instructions at the distressed mom, well, she came to a quick realization. Quote, I knew if I didn't get over there, it wasn't going to be a good outcome. That's what Morales said in a release. I jumped over the checkpoint conveyor belt rollers, and she gave me the baby. I then performed the Heimlich maneuver on him. When she draped him over her arm, face down, and patted his back the first time, there was no response. That's what officials say. But Morales, she kept trying, and her continued efforts, well, they paid off. You see, according to officials, Morales said, while she's performed the Heimlich on adults and children, this was her first time saving an infant's life. She goes on to say, I saw the video afterward, and it was the first time I've ever seen myself in action saving a life. It was mind-blowing to watch. I felt that my training and experience just took over. Well, the mother was so stunned by what unraveled in front of her, well, she was too nervous to hold her son through security. So Morales carried the baby through the metal detector and waited for the arrival of the EMT on the other side. 2 months on the job, and she's literally a lifesaver. That's what New Jersey Federal Security Director Thomas Carter said in a release. He goes on to say that Officer Morales' quick reaction and actions helped ensure the family will have a happy holiday season. Her actions were inspiring. And that, my friend, this TSA agent who did not just stand by and watch, but leaped to action. This is indeed our Charlie Crimebuster Citizen of the Week. Now our focus today is on Chad Daybell, the gravedigger author that dug his own grave. And to understand the case better, well, let's give you a quick timeline. There was a felony indictment that indicated that on October the 26th in 2018, Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell, they met and began discussing their religious beliefs. And that discussion of those religious beliefs, well, that was to justify the killing of Tammy Daybell, Joshua J.J. Vallow, and Tylee Ryan. You see, both of these children were Lori's kids. The couple is believed to have met around this time at a religious conference in St. George, Utah. During those discussions, Chad and Lori talked about dark people and zombies. You see, according to them, there were people on Earth that were not the people they were supposed to be. It seems that some evil spirit took over their own bodies. And get this, the only way to release the evil spirits, well, it was to kill their bodies, and then their souls would be set free. Also, they both had become to believe that they were chosen to lead the 144,000 righteous people that were left at the second coming of Christ, the end of the world. You see, all others had been killed off, all the other righteous people killed off by the terrible tribulation at the end of the world. And they together, Lori and Chad, were to be on a mission together as leaders of the new world. And there was nothing to keep them from this mission. Not the fact that they were each married to others. You see, there was nothing that could keep them from this important mission. Now, I know you're thinking this is crazy, and you're right, evil crazy, but not what I would term legal crazy. You see, both of them knew exactly what they were doing. And to assist them on this mission, well, it was Lori's brother, Alex Cox. You see, he was her protective brother. And he bought into Lori and Chad's doomsday cult. He had actually began his criminal involvement in the case early on when Lori was married to a guy by the name of Joseph Ryan, and it was in a custody battle for Tylee. You see, one day, Alex, Lori's brother, confronted Joseph Ryan and assaulted him with a stun gun. Now, Alex went to jail for that early on. And it became apparent early on in this doomsday cult that Lori and Chad had much more than a professional relationship in their endeavor to lead the doomsday preparations. They had indeed become linked together romantically. And to seal the deal, in other words, to justify their lustful actions, well, they cloaked it all in their doomsday theology. Meaning they had been on earth before, according to them, and that it was always meant to be that they would be together one day on earth. That in the eyes of God they were linked together. But yet, there were some earthly problems hindering their mission and relationship. Problem number one was Lori's husband, Charles Vallow, her fourth husband. You see, as Chad Daybell became brighter in Lori's life, well, Charles, her husband, he became darker. Yep, you guessed it. He became one of those dark zombies that Chad and Lori had talked about. In fact, Charles, he began to pick up on it. He began to fear for his life. She actually told him, she said, "You're not Charles. I don't know who you are and what you did with Charles." And Charles Vallow, who became victim to the mission to eliminate the darkness, well, he thought his wife was having a mental breakdown. He even reported it to police. Attempted to have her committed, told him he was scared for his life. But Lori, well, she was very charming, and she charmed her way out of that, and out of that commitment, mentally. Now, Charles, he was on to Lori and Chad. He filed for divorce, and secretly he changed his life insurance beneficiary from Lori to his sister, and he was in fear for the safety of his children. Text messages now reveal that Charles was set up for murder. And on July 11th, 2019, Alex Cox, Lori's doomsday hitman, he shoots and kills Charles Vallow as he comes to pick up his adopted son, JJ. Now, Alex, he claimed that it was self-defense, but text now reveals, and other circumstances say otherwise. And to Lori's surprise, she did not inherit the $1 million life insurance on Charles, her estranged dead husband, because, you see, he had changed, as I said before, the beneficiary, which surprised doomsday mom Lori a great deal when she called to check on the life insurance. Now, just how much Chad Daybell at this time was a part of that particular plot remains to be seen, but we do know this. Get this, just hours after Charles's death, Chad Daybell, he was recorded making a call to a local funeral home, making arrangements for Charles to be cremated and his remains sent to Louisiana. And in that recording, he lied. He said he was a nephew to Charles Vallow. Methinks something else is going on there, right, don't you? So now, Charles Vallow is out of the way. What is next now for the doomsday couple? Well, the only people that were there at the time that Charles was shot was Lori, Alex, little JJ, and Ty Lee, who was a teenager at the time. And it does appear at first that Ty Lee, the teenager, she went along with a self-defense story. But maybe she knew too much more about what happened. What really happened at that moment? And it also appears that she, too, this teenager, went dark. In other words, to Lori and Chad pronounced on a judgment scale people's standing, whether they were in the light or the dark. And he did predict to Lori that Ty Lee was going dark, that an evil spirit had entered her as well. Now, you do remember, don't you, that the belief is that the only way to rid the body of an evil spirit is to kill the body. So get this. On September the 8th, 2019, Ty Lee, JJ, Alex, and Lori are seen at the Yellowstone National Park. There are pictures of them all together there. On that day, September the 8th, 2019. And that, my friend, was the very last day that Ty Lee, the young teenager, was seen alive. There's another interesting point on that day of September the 8th. It was on that very day that Chad Daybell increased his own wife's, Tammy's, life insurance to the maximum amount he could, which was just about $500,000. You see, just 2 weeks later after this, after we find that it was the last time that Ty Lee was seen, and after Chad had increased the life insurance, just after that, Lori described JJ as jumping off the top of the refrigerator, knocking down a picture of Christ. In other words, she was describing little JJ as someone as though a demon was in him. And then, yes, you guessed it, little JJ went missing as well. And so now we have 2 children missing. But wait, there's more. Talking about people that are standing in the way of Chad and Lori getting together, leading these people in the doomsday time. There's one other obstacle, Tammy Daybell. Chad is married to Tammy Daybell, Chad's wife. And on October the 9th, Tammy calls 911. She says a masked man shot at her in the driveway with a paintball gun. She goes on to post this experience on Facebook, saying she has no idea who the person was or why they would shoot at her. But court documents, they later reveal that Alex Cox attempted to shoot and kill Tammy Daybell that day. And something else. There have been disturbing texts that's been recovered from Chad Daybell to Lori. One of them said that Chad referred to himself as a modern Henry Potter, escaping to spend time with his goddess lover Lori, yet while he was still married to Tammy. And there was one even more darker text that appeared. He stated, Yeah, you guessed it, that his wife Tammy had turned dark and had been taken over by another. And he also mentioned, quote, the timing of her removal. So on October the 19th, 2019, just a month after little JJ was last seen, well, Chad Daybell, he calls 911, and he now says that Tammy died in her sleep at their Salem home. The family requested no autopsy, even though it was unknown why or how she had died in her sleep. But this doomsday duo cannot waste time, because they're on a mission from God, they say, to lead the doomsday crowd at the end of time, which is fastly approaching. You see, within weeks of Tammy's death, Chad and Lori, they're married in Hawaii on November the 5th. The wedding ring was purchased by Lori just days before Tammy's death. After their Hawaii wedding, they returned to Rexburg. And over the coming weeks, police say that Chad told witnesses that Lori had no minor children. Police also say that Lori told people that Tylee had died earlier, 11 years earlier, or years earlier rather. Then on November the 26th, the Popo gets involved. The police are sent to check on JJ. It's a welfare check. They were sent there at the request of JJ's grandparents, Larry and Kay Woodcock. You see, they had not spoken to the boy in months. Lori then tells police there that JJ was with her friend Melanie Gibb in Arizona. At the same time, Chad Daybell calls Melanie and asks her not to answer the police calls checking on this story. And police then determined within days that JJ was not with Melanie Gibb. The next morning, the very next morning, police returned with a search warrant. But guess what? The Daybells are not there. They've quickly left. In fact, records reveal that on December the 1st, Chad and Lori catch an American Airlines flight to Hawaii. And the children are not with their parents. Meanwhile, back in Fremont County, well, the sheriff's office determined that Tammy Daybell's death is suspicious. Her body is exhumed, and an autopsy is performed in Utah. On October the 20th, Rexburg Police Department announced that JJ and Tylee are missing. They say their disappearance is possibly linked to the suspicious death of Tammy Daybell. And the following day, the police then say that Chad and Lori are persons of interest in the case. Now, to get you up where we are, we have two people dead who are now attributed to suspicious activity. That's Charles Vallow, Lori's fourth husband, and Tammy Daybell, Chad's former wife. And along with that, there are two children, Tylee and JJ, that are missing. So now you're probably asking, how was it that Chad and Lori were indicted for the murder of her children? How did they tie it all together? We're going to tell you that in a moment, but right now it's time for our crazy crook story. As you know, on a podcast like this where we talk about dark things, we like to lighten the load a little bit with a crazy crook story, and this one, as all of them, is indeed a doozy. Security footage from the police station in Gladstone, Oregon, shows a male suspected attempting to take the only bike in the bicycle rack outside the building on December the 27th. That was shortly after 6 p.m. in the evening. In the video, the masked and hooded suspect can be seen attempting to flee the bike from a rack and to take it outside the police station. He was using a pair of large bolt cutters. Well, the rack is directly beside a window stamped with the words Gladstone Police around the corner from the entrance of the station. And so a uniformed police officer walks out of the station and approaches the suspect less than 30 seconds into the video, startling the would-be thief. The officer, well, he points a taser at the suspect's chest, prompting him to sit down with hands on his head. It is dumb. That's what Sergeant Carl Bell of the Gladstone Police Department says. That's what he told ABC 2 News on Tuesday. Quote, I have not actually seen something this crazy because the officers were inside watching it on video camera. And Adam Bell, 26 years of age, well, he's been charged with theft, criminal mischief, and a felon in possession of weapons. That's what Bell told ABC News. So here's our crook outside of the police station, right down from the window of the police station, on video, trying to steal a bicycle right out front of the police station. And this, my friend, is our Charlie Crimebuster's Crazy Crook of the Week. Now back to our main focus, the gravedigger who digs his own grave. Now, to be fair, Chad's family, well, they believe, or did believe, that Chad was a victim of all this, and that the illegal acts had all been a part of Lori and her brother Alex's illegal activities. But the evidence, I'm afraid it says otherwise. First, always remember this, my friend, your cell phone leaves a footpath of wherever you've been. So in attempting to find these missing children, well, cops traced the activity of Lori's hitman brother, Alex Cox. You see, they had already been alerted to the suspicious death of Charles, Lori's fourth husband, by the hands of Alex Cox. And so they find that on September the 9th, just one day after Tylee was last seen alive, well, phone records, well, they placed Alex, of all places, on Chad Daybell's property in the general area where investigators would eventually find, well, they found Tylee's and little JJ's body. Also on that same day, Chad, he sent a text to his wife, Tammy, and he was saying that he shot a raccoon and he buried it there in that same area. You see, that was a good way to cover up to his wife. That's why the ground there may have been disturbed. So yes, I do believe that the gravedigger, that he digs his own grave with the text and other evidence that proves that he's a part of this whole evil doomsday conspiracy. You see, now they've already had Chad's preliminary hearing. Lori's hearing, well, it's been put on hold because she's been evaluated to see if she's sane enough to stand trial. You and I both know this is just another one of her acts to avoid prosecution, and I believe she too will be brought to justice. But now, despite the fact that the preliminary hearing, well, it found that there was enough evidence to bind Chad over for a trial and for facing a possible death penalty if convicted. Even though that's already happened, Chad's family still believes or wants to believe that he's a pawn being used in the hands of Lori and Alex Cox. But consider with me the following. Number one, it was his own fanatical teaching to paint people with darkness and saying the only way they could be free is to kill the body that brought all of this into fruition. Number two, he was on the phone just hours after Alex had shot and killed Lori's fourth husband. And he was lying about that, saying that he was Charles' nephew, attempting to get the body of Charles cremated and sent away. Number three, he states that Tylee had a darkness which meant the only way to have her escape was to kill her. And number four, he texts Lori that his wife Tammy has the darkness, and that, quote, it is only a matter of time before her removal. Number five, he gives great praise to Alex for his faithfulness and duty for the doomsday cult activities. And number six, it is on his property that the children were buried, where Alex was present. And the same day, Chad sends a text to his wife about killing a raccoon there and burying it on the property. He also mentioned in the text that he was cleaning up the burn pit, the very same burn pit where Tylee's body was burned before burial. It was on his property and because of his influence that these two precious children were buried. Yes, the gravedigger dug his own grave and left evidence behind. Well, now his real trial will follow, and Lori's will follow, and they will be another high-profile trial that we will keep you updated on. And let me remind you that you can hear our other podcasts on the Doomsday Cult on Charlie Crimebuster. Go to charliecrimebuster.com, click on the menu, go to the Charlie Shows, or you can find us on your podcast platform. We'll also give you a link at the bottom of our show notes so that you can get caught up with all of the Charlie Shows. Now, in closing with our Charlie Chat, let me say, do not paint all people of faith with the same paintbrush as this doomsday cult people. The Bible itself warns us to watch out for people who come as wolves in sheep clothing. It tells us, the Bible does, that there will be those who will masquerade themselves as people of faith who will do evil, and it tells us to avoid them. Now, this should not discount the good that has been done and will continue to be done in faith's good name. The Bible says that Jesus went about doing good, and the people of faith have led the way in caring about others throughout history. Our best universities and our best hospitals have come about because of people of faith. Lives have been changed. Alcoholics and drug users have been changed, all by faith. So do not place all the people of faith in the category of this evil doomsday cult. Instead, become aware and become alert and be safe. For the life you save, well, it may be your very own.